Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Carl sent me a note. It said, Steve, as an update to one of your older videos, video episode 6.431, about the teenager who was threatened with arrest in Wisconsin over a social media post. She had filed a lawsuit, and that lawsuit was just resolved recently because a court ruled in her favor. A federal court found in favor of the teenager and said the sheriff's department was out of line in what they did. So there's a couple other things going on, and I'm actually going to go into some depth on this one because I am disturbed by statements made by the attorney for the sheriff's department. At one point in time, the attorney for the sheriff's department was quoted as saying that no one was threatened with arrest. That's NBC15.com reporting that the attorney for the sheriff of the Marquette County Sheriff's Department said no one was threatened with arrest. And yet, in court, apparently the attorney said yes, people were threatened with arrest. And so when someone says one thing here and the exact opposite here, you have to ask yourself, did they change their mind? Did they learn new information? Why did they not know that all along? Or were they making false statements publicly? Interesting. But we'll back up and we'll get that in a second. Headline, recent from the Associated Press, Wisconsin teenager wins lawsuit over COVID social media post. The Wisconsin high school student on Friday won her federal lawsuit that she'd brought against the sheriff who threatened her with jail time early in the COVID-19 pandemic if she didn't remove social media posts saying she had the virus. Now, if you want to split hairs, it was really the fact that they threatened her parents with arrest. And she was fearful that her parents were going to be arrested if she didn't remove the post. But there was still a threat of someone being arrested. The U.S. District Judge ruled that her constitutional right to free speech was violated when a Marquette County Sheriff's deputy in March of 2020 demanded that the Oxford teenager take down her Instagram posts or face arrest. The First Amendment is not a game setting for the government to toggle off and on. It applies in times of tranquility and times of strife, the judge wrote in his order. The Wisconsin Institute for Liberty and Law filed a lawsuit against the county sheriff and a patrol sergeant. Meanwhile, the attorney who filed the case said this decision underscores that First Amendment rights cannot be dispatched with an emergency. More importantly, law enforcement has no business trying to regulate the social media posts of local teenagers. And that right there puts it in sharp focus. Law enforcement has no business trying to regulate the social media posts of local teenagers. Think of that right there. A teenager posted something on Instagram. The police showed up at their house. And by their house, I mean the family's house. And they got the parents outside and said, if that post doesn't come down, someone's going to jail. That is not the kind of thing that we imagine happening here in America. Someplace else, maybe. But here in America, no. So the attorney for the sheriff did not immediately return a message Friday seeking comment on the ruling. But I will point out that previously, and this is a quote from NBC15.com, an attorney for the sheriff and the Marquette County Sheriff's Department said no one was threatened with arrest. No one was threatened with arrest. Now that quote came from earlier, before the court ruled. But in court, the attorney for the sheriff's department apparently said, yes, someone was threatened with arrest because they have stipulated facts in the case. So in court, an attorney says one thing, publicly says the exact opposite. Now, facts don't do that. And it is a problem if an attorney makes false statements publicly. There is a problem there, but we'll get to that in a second. The judge said the sheriff's office defense that it was acting in the greater good of the community does not insulate it. Demanding a 16-year-old remove protected speech from her Instagram account is a First Amendment violation. The young lady, who was a sophomore in the Westfield School District in Marquette County last year, had a severe respiratory illness with symptoms matching COVID during a spring break trip to Florida. She tested negative, but her attorney said that the doctors told the family that she likely had the virus, but missed the window for testing positive. And you have to remember that in March of 2020, there was a lot of confusion about testing and whether they could determine if you had it or not, or how certain they were of testing people after the fact, whether they had it back then. and that is actually quite important here. The girl posted about her experience on March 26, 2020. Her first Instagram post showed her looking out a window with the message, "I won't be back for a while longer due to me having the COVID-19 virus. I don't want the attention, it's just the truth." A second post showing her in a hospital bed hooked up to what appears to be an oxygen mask included the caption, "Winning the fight with COVID-19." It was that post that the sheriff's deputy had a screenshot of and demanded that she remove, according to her attorney. At the time, Marquette County had just 2 confirmed COVID cases. Meanwhile, as of this most recent Friday, it's had 1,600, according to Wisconsin Department of Health Services. So she filed the lawsuit saying that her First Amendment rights had been trampled. And in the United States District Court, Eastern District of Wisconsin, the court recently came down with a ruling and ruled in her favor and said she wins. There's no question it was First Amendment, it was violated, and there was a threat of arrest. Imagine that. So, interestingly, the opinion is, I think, 13 pages long. You can find it on the internet. It's not that hard to find. Her name is so unusual that if you simply type in Amyaya Cahoon, Amyah, second word Cohoon, Amyaya Cahoon versus Conrath, Konrath, and federal district case, you'll find the opinion. But the second paragraph of the opinion is my favorite because it says, the parties agree that the facts are not disputed. The parties agree that the facts are not disputed. And they would do that through their pleadings. They would submit pleadings to the court and they'd say, these are the facts we agree to. And both sides agreed to the facts. They are not disputed. And one of the facts they agreed to is that there was a threat of arrest. So it gets us back to the news reports that say, an attorney for the sheriff in the Marquette County Sheriff's Department said no one was threatened with arrest. Yet in court, stipulated, facts are not disputed. The entirety of the sergeant's encounter with the student and her parents is captured in a dash cam video. The entire thing was recorded, so there's no way to argue with this. That video, along with other record evidence, establishes that defendants violated Amyaya's free speech rights by demanding she take down her social media posts or face criminal citation or arrest. And the word arrest is written there in a sentence that follows the statement, the parties agree, the facts are not disputed. She was threatened with arrest. So the police showed up at her house after she made the posts. Upon exiting the house, Amyaya heard Sergeant Klump explain, all I'm here for is to figure out what this post is about, seeing she tested negative, and we need to get it taken down. Amyaya then agreed to go inside and take the post down. While she was inside, Sergeant Klump threatened and said, if the post doesn't come down, the sheriff has directed me to issue disorderly conduct citations. If not, start taking people to jail. Now, that statement was said to her father while she had gone inside to remove the posts, okay? But the phrase, start taking people to jail. Contrast that with the attorney saying publicly, no one was threatened with arrest. No one was threatened with arrest. And yet, the video shows Klump clearly stating, if not, start taking people to jail. Now, I know someone out there is going to say, Steve, he's splitting hairs. Because taking people to jail might not be arrest. Because to arrest somebody's one thing. You might take someone to jail to give them a tour. You might take them to jail to give them an idea of what jails look like. No. When a cop is on your front porch saying, I may have to take you to jail, he's talking about an arrest. And no attorney with any sense would make any argument otherwise. Unless, of course, they're simply trying to spin a story and don't seem to mind the fact that they're making factually false statements publicly, which I don't know about the ethics in Wisconsin, but in Michigan, that'd be a problem. Now, I admit I'm only an attorney in Michigan, and the ethical rules in Wisconsin might be different. Attorneys might be allowed to make false statements in Wisconsin. I don't know. Meanwhile, the court goes into a much further explanation on this because the question is whether the statement was protected and whether the actions of the police were wrong. And several pages are taken by the court in explaining why this is a First Amendment question. And then the question is, was there some wrongful action by the police? And of course, it boils down to the cops came to her house and said they might start taking people to jail. So the question is that a threat? And the court says, yes, it is. It says, and again, the audio-visual recording of the police encounter at the home captured Klump threatening Mr. Cahoon. If the post doesn't come down, the sheriff has directed me to issue disorderly conduct citations. If not, start taking people to jail. Now, the defendants argued that Klump never made this threat to Amyaya. Instead, he made the threat when only her father was present, and that she could not have personally experienced any threat of adverse action. So basically saying, look, we didn't threaten her, we threatened her dad. And yet, no one was threatened with arrest. I know I keep going back to that, but it's still striking me funny. The court says this superficial analysis fails for a number of reasons. First, the record makes it clear the sergeant's intention was to get Amyaya to remove her social media posts through the use of threats against her and perhaps her parents. Further, the video of Sergeant Klump's interaction with Mr. Cahoon shows that the police officer twice in Amyaya's presence declined to contradict Mr. Cahoon's assertions that the sheriff's department was threatening to take them to jail over the post. So what they're getting at here is the student goes inside the house, and while she's in there, the police officer says, look, we might start taking people to jail. Start taking people to jail. Then she comes back outside, and they're saying she didn't hear that threat. So we threatened one person, but someone else is who removed the post. It's unrelated. But the problem is, this was a very real threat of arrest, both to a person of ordinary firmness and particularly to a 16-year-old child watching a policeman argue with her father. And what they're getting at is that when she came back out, her dad said twice, words to the effect of, I can't believe you'd take someone to jail over this. I can't believe you're threatening me with jail. And despite him saying that to the police officer in front of his daughter, the police officer did not contradict it. And there are times where people will say, I said something and he didn't contradict me, therefore he agreed with me. That's not always the case, but here it is. Because if you view the totality of the circumstances, right? Let's just talk about the three people, the police officer, the father, the daughter. The police officer shows up, and this is all happening, let's say, on the porch, figuratively speaking. The police officer says, we want this post taken down. She goes, fine, I'll take it down. She goes inside the house, and while she's inside the house, the police officer says to Dad, we might start taking people to jail. She comes back out, and the dad goes, I can't believe that you would threaten people, take people to jail over a social media post. I can't believe, and he says it twice, and the cop stands there. Now, if you're accusing the cop of something crazy in front of other people, you think you'd contradict it. And the federal court judge appears to say, no, that right there is a very real threat of arrest. A very real threat of arrest. And I'm quoting that right there. So I'm quoting that there was, in fact, a threatened arrest if the post was not taken down. So the court came down specifically in her favor and said, conclusion, the First Amendment is not a game setting for the government to toggle off and on. It applies in times of tranquility, in times of strife. While defendants in this case may have believed their actions served the greater good, that belief cannot insulate them. Demanding a 16-year-old remove protected speech from her Instagram account is a First Amendment violation. Declaratory judgment is granted. Accordingly, the plaintiff's motion for summary judgment is granted, meaning there's no need to have a trial because the parties agree to the facts. It is further ordered the plaintiff's motion for preliminary injunction is denied. They had asked for an injunction going forward, but apparently that's a moot question now. It's further ordered the defendant's motion for summary judgment is denied. So both sides brought motions for summary judgment, asking the court to rule and say there's no need for trial. And the court said, yeah, you're right, there is no need for trial. Plaintiffs win. The plaintiff wins. So that's an interesting case and the way it turns out. And again, I'm bothered by the fact that an attorney for the sheriff in the Marquette County Sheriff's Department said no one was threatened with arrest. And yet the parties agree the facts are not disputed. So I'm not sure what to do with that. Now, you might be asking, wait, Steve, she won a lawsuit. Does she get money? We always hear about people winning lawsuits and getting money. No, it turns out that I dug up a copy of the complaint, the actual lawsuit that was filed on her behalf. And the lawsuit asks for, in its prayer for relief, which is what you call that, where your wish list at the end of the complaint, plaintiff requests the following relief. 1, a declaration that the Instagram posts were speech protected by the First Amendment, and the court granted that. 2, a declaration that defendants may not cite plaintiff or her parents for disorderly conduct, basically in the future, which the court said that's a moot question, don't need to cover that. And then 3, an injunction prohibiting defendants from citing Amiyah or her parents for disorderly conduct, which became a moot point also. And then 4, nominal damages. Nominal damages. And so nominal damages, that a couple different ways of looking at this. But it's not uncommon where somebody's doing something on principle. And generally speaking, you get into a quagmire discussing things that are done on a matter of principle. Because sometimes your principles are very important to you, but courts might not see it that way. So you go to court and make a big hullabaloo about something, and it turns out there's not much at stake. And I've seen some courts that kind of say, we spent a lot of time on this, and it looks like you're not asking for a whole lot. But a First Amendment right is a very serious issue. So no one's going to question why she brought this suit, I don't think. But sometimes people will actually argue as a defense, look, they're not even asking you for money. It must not be serious. So a lot of times plaintiffs will say, we're asking for something just to prove we're right. And so obviously a court ruling saying we're right is one thing. But if you want to give us damages, we'll take them, but we're not asking for a lot in damages. Now, if they wanted to, they could have said, we want, $19 million in a ham sandwich. But they didn't do that. So I got to give them credit. They filed a federal lawsuit, federal court, and in their prayer for relief, all they said was they want nominal damages. And nominal damages in this setting simply means, if necessary, just enough to say that we had enough to get into court. But the court didn't even address it in the order. And instead, the court just said, no, I'm going to grant your declaration that you had a First Amendment right that was violated, and the police department was wrong in doing so. So it gets us back to the early confusing days of COVID, number one. But number two, again, I am still baffled by the fact, this is a quote from NBC15.com, an attorney for the sheriff and the Marquette County Sheriff's Department said no one was threatened with arrest. Yet, the complaint says the parties agree, the facts are not disputed, and the police basically demanded she take down her social media posts or face criminal citation or arrest. Now, you might say, Steve, maybe the attorney was speaking before he knew all the facts. Should he do that? And by the way, since the facts are all contained, for the most part, on body camera footage, or dash cam footage, they called it, why doesn't he watch that before he makes a statement? And it sounds more to me like he was making a statement that he was trying to spin something, because he knew that if he said, no one was threatened with arrest, people are going to look at the story and go, oh, kid's making up stuff. Of course, he's posting nonsense on social media. Police were probably right to go out there and ask her to take it down. Well, it turns out that that statement was not correct, was it? An attorney for the sheriff and the Marquette County Sheriff's Department said no one was threatened with arrest, NBC15.com. Meanwhile, the actual court ruling, the parties agreed the facts are not disputed and that she was told to take down her social media posts or face criminal citation or arrest. So there you go. That's how that shakes out. The original video I did in this was 6.431 quite a while ago. I'll put a link to that in the description below. I got to thank Carl for sending it to me, and a bunch of news coverage on this. A lot of that's from the Associated Press. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. A single moment of happiness can rub out hours of misery.